Welcome to the Freight Project podcast, brought to you by Ceresys, a North American third-party logistics company providing shippers transportation management, technology, and solutions.
On today's The Freight Project podcast episode, I welcome Charles Walker, Vice President of Logistics Business Development for Aurora Global Solutions. Charles will talk about his love of logistics, which was first felt during his long career working in logistics and supply chain in 1984 when he joined the U.S. Army. Charles will talk about what he's learned from the military side of logistics and how he's applying that today as a practitioner in the civilian world at Aurora Global Solutions. This is a must-listen episode for those who want to learn a lot of wisdom and love logistics themselves. I hope you enjoy this episode of the Freight Project Podcast. Well, hello, Charles. It is such an honor and a pleasure to feature your voice today on the Freight Project Podcast. You know, we've talked here and there on LinkedIn now, as we've known not just for 5 years about logistics and supply chain, but now almost 7 years. And it just goes by so fast that it feels like 5, but it's actually 7. So I guess we're having fun, maybe. But you know, you're always so kind to offer and engage on our content, offer your thoughts on what we're doing, and you have such a great background, and we want to make sure folks know a little bit about that. So since you're a first-time guest, can you please let our listeners know a bit about your journey in logistics and what got you to your position you are in now, and what you're doing with your career?
Well, hey, good morning, Adam. Thank you so much, man. It's a pleasure to be here. Like you said, you're exactly correct. We've been communicating on LinkedIn for way over 5, almost 7 years or so. And it's an honor to speak with you via this podcast. I appreciate the opportunity, man. I really do. My logistic background and supply chain journey began in 1984 when I joined the U.S. Army, active duty. My initial job, and it's called the MOS, Military Occupational Specialty. It was a 76 Charlie, equipment parts and record specialist. In the military, you know, those position numbers change as you get promoted, go to different units. But I became a 76 Yankee and retired as a senior non-commissioned officer as a 92 Yankee. All of the roles were in logistics and supply chain. And man, like I say, I love each stage of supply chain and logistics. And after retirement from the military, I continued in the field, worked for some major organizations like Stanley Associates, SAIC, Raytheon, RDTS with the F-15 program, and all was government logistic contract roles. This all led up to my present role as the Vice President of Logistics and Business Development for Aurora Global Solutions, which is a veteran female-owned 8 Alpha company here in the Atlanta area. So my background really started in the military, and I'm proud about it.
Absolutely. Well, what a journey, man. That's a ton of experience, and I know they're probably happy to have you over there at Aurora. Okay. And as I like to have, I do a lot better with female bosses. They get right down to it. So I do glad to hear that it's veteran owned and woman owned, man. You know, because they don't mess around. You can't get you can't get away with nothing, and that's a good thing.
That's good
leadership.
Thing. They keep you balanced. They keep you on your toes.
Absolutely. Well, I love that you started out, you know, your logistics career in the Army. Not a lot of people know this, but my stepfather was an officer in the Army, Lieutenant Colonel Jim Rivera. Rest in peace, sir. Passed away in 2008, unfortunately, from pancreatic cancer. But his last position was Civil Military Operations Manager. And in that position, he coordinated activities of workers engaged in preparing to go to combat disaster situation and negotiated with civic and professional leaders, both here in the U.S. and with foreign nations. And his job was to mitigate, develop, and implement preparedness, response, and recovery plans, true logistics stuff, in accordance with the logistics operation manager. Now, you did similar things that my stepfather did. And as you state on your LinkedIn profile, you planned, synchronized, coordinated, and executed logistics operations for FORCECOM units as directed by Commander G4. And you assisted all related senior mission commanders in the areas of equipment building, transportation, contracting, acquisition, and technology integration, a bunch more stuff as well. You know, and it really got you prepared for where you are today. You know, it's sad that my stepdad isn't here and he wasn't able to go full time into civilian logistics. Right. And just before I myself started a career in logistics. He unfortunately passed, because I'd love to share that with him and my passion for it today. I'm sure we could have a lot of conversations, just like you and I are here today, Charles. So that means a lot to me. So with all that said, when you think about that military experience, how did it prepare you now for what you're doing at Aurora? What did you learn that really stuck with you?
Well, Adam, first of all, I want to say, from speaking for all veterans and myself, we appreciate your stepfather for his service to our country, and may he rest in peace and never be forgotten. And I like to say that for all of our past and fallen soldiers, because they should never be forgotten for what they've done for this great country, and they've paved the way for so many. So I keep that close to my heart, whereby I always acknowledge my fallen comrades. And my time and experience in the military prepared me with skill sets to understand the importance of on-time logistics and being the best at whatever we do. My time in the military taught me about how getting logistic parts of the operation is the key to success on the entire mission. The military is very mission focused, so you get ingrained in the fact that, hey, somebody's depending on you. So what you focus on is being proactive and always being on time with everything. And you realize early on that failure is not an option, but it's also just a situation. It's not a person. So the military teaches you that. And each stage of logistics life cycle affects the next stage. That being said, I had to understand that if I made a mistake at the requisition of a supply part, that mistake travels throughout the life cycle until it's caught, and in the military, if it's not caught, it could cause problems on the battlefield for a service member. And so we just learned to remember that you have to coordinate, collaborate, cooperate, and communicate. And I think that passed on into my civilian side of the logistic phase, whereby I use some of my strong military leadership traits and just try to blend them in with the civilian side on how they do and operate things. With the military, we can be a little bit more aggressive on what we do, but on the civilian side, we have to be a little bit more reactionary and passive when you're dealing with certain behavior types.
Well, but there's going to be a lot of times where the unexpected occurs. You didn't expect a new plan, but you got to be ready for it. Contingency.
You got to be always ready. Yeah.
We'll add that fifth C in there: coordinate, collaborate, cooperate, communicate, and contingency. And that's never been true with today's, tariffs or what folks are dealing with, the coronavirus, or heck, everything. I mean, the changes in just the delivery models, right? Whether it's even B2B folks who are even going e-commerce or figuring out maybe some last mile moves. So it's a lot of changes, especially over the time you and I've known each other. It's been like a rocket ship. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. You got to stay abreast of the changes. It's just everything changed so fast. And as we speak today, something is changing in the supply chain. You have to be able to foresee the bottlenecks and all that. You just got to be a visionary thinker, when you're in the supply chain, because you want to ensure that you're doing your best so that your piece of the whole pie is not the bottleneck.
That's right. Well, you take that practical experience that you had in the military, and what I really loved is that you didn't stop there. You didn't take that experience for granted. You said, look, I want to join this up and become even better. And it looks like that you've, put a lot of focus on education. You got an MBA and then did a program focused on supply chain. So what did you learn in class that helped you bridge that military learnings to now that career in a civilian world and helped you up your game? Oh, yes, sir. That education, I believe I'm addicted to education and learning, partly because of my mother, man. She stressed education in the household as a child. She ensured that all of her children, she said, at least you will graduate from high school in my house. So that was ingrained in my mind, even when I went in the military and wanted to learn and just be the best at my craft. And I always call logistics my craft. I wanted to be the best. Every time I went to a new unit, I would go around and meet all the supply sergeants first before I meet the commanders. I would go and find out each supply sergeant, see what they do, what their supply room looked like, how was they neat or clean or whatever. And I did a comparison analysis of all of them. And I said, okay, I'm good.
I would look at it like that. And then when I started my psychology degree, while I was on active duty, I went to Fayetteville State University and got my bachelor's in psychology, because I know that everything starts with the mind. I always understood that from my mother. And then I continued on with my education and got my Master of Public Administration for nonprofit organizations, because I wanted to understand it, the government side of how they do nonprofits, because I knew a lot of nonprofits help veterans. And then I kept going. I said, okay, I want my project management MBA. And then I was looking at the PMP programs and going to all the meetings, end up finishing up my MBA in project management. Then I continued. I said, okay, I'm going to go back and get my global supply chain operation MBA, because I wanted to understand, after being overseas, so many deployments, we were getting supplies and equipment coming in to support the war fighters. I was trying to figure out, okay, it's coming from the States, it's coming from Germany, it's coming from here. How do all these parts get here globally? And I wanted to understand that dynamic and then put it all together. And that's what led me to what I'm doing right now on the military side, and just merging it with the civilian side.
Well, pretty soon they're going to call you Dr. Supply Chain, man.
Right.
Dr. Walker.
Yeah.
That might be in your future.
I think so.
Well, I don't know if there is a doctorate in supply chain, but there should be, man. It's becoming so important, right?
It's so important.
It's a part of society, and even the public's learning a lot more about the supply chain. And I think Amazon has done a lot of that.
Oh yeah.
And they brought it up to a mass awareness, especially as we get packages at our house more and more and more. I think that shipping becomes such a strategic advantage. But as you kind of have learned through education, through experience in the military, now as the vice president over there at Aurora with a focus on logistics and supply chain, what'd you find more difficult? Did you find the military was harder, or was it kind of tough going when you went into the civilian life and working in that side? Which one did you find harder?
For me, I think it was more difficult planning for the civilian sector, because some of the roles I had, things happened more slowly than I expected. There were key steps that, if not omitted, it could create a smoother supply chain operation. In the military, you see something and you make it happen. If it's part of the team, you make it happen and you take responsibility for the whole team. I just had never been in an environment where a person would be individualized and say, okay, that's the problem right there. And I used to be getting in trouble. A lot of jobs, just like I say, sir, I take responsibility for all my guys. They look at me like, what is he talking about? I said, yeah, I take responsibility because maybe it's training that they need. And I did a failure point on the training of that. So we'll go back in and do that training. But then they would just stop, and all the guys like, wow, what is he talking about? Yeah, but that's how it is, because the military is more detailed and steps are followed to the letter to getting things done. The processes are also monitored and inspected on a regular basis to ensure conformity. And on the civilian side, in some cases, the processes are implemented after a point of failure or blame for, a point. I found that on a lot of jobs. So what in the military, they say this, and I had a general walk to me in Afghanistan. He said, Charles, you know what? What gets checked gets done. When you check something, your guys know you're going to be here to check it. They're going to do it. He says it's different than micromanagement. You are actually checking on your guys to ensure that everything is running smoothly and you don't wait for emergencies. And so that was the transition for me. But after I look at all the process on the civilian side, they all sort of parallel and merge together.
Well, if you could help make the, commercial logistics, the civilian logistics side less reactive, I think you're really, a big benefit to Aurora and their goals. Because as you said earlier, the supply chain is no longer just a department. It is what powers the organization.
Exactly. And
so that's how an organization is going to succeed or fail in today's more aware, consumer aware, even in our B2B lives, right?
Yes, sir.
We're all consumers. I mean, I may work for a logistics company. You may be in a B2B type job at Aurora, but we're all buyers too of Amazon and Walmart and Target, personal lives, and that impacts us. So we're those who can be proactive like you're trying to do and kind of mirror more of the military are going to be really well served to succeed.
Yes, sir.
I think one of the things that I'm guessing our listeners who, they're practitioners in logistics can learn a lot from your dual careers in the military and now in civilian life is maybe what you're seeing today from your perspective. What are the biggest challenge for logistics managers on the day-to-day?
I think what I've been seeing, Adam, is that a lot of time logistic managers, the biggest challenges is that not being able to recognize bottlenecks in a timely manner and relieving them quickly. Sometimes the logistic manager must have the foresight and the vision. They must understand the whole process before adding any type of continuous improvement to the process. Sometimes we'll implement an improvement to a process we don't fully understand. And the way we get that understanding is by talking to our guys who are actually doing it hands-on every day. And then step in there sometime and get our hands dirty and work with those guys. And it builds morale and rapport with them as well. And then just be openly and understanding and communicating with those people every day for their input before we, make any continuous improvement plans without understanding the whole process and what caused the bottleneck. A lot of time we find ourselves as logistics managers is working on effects instead of working on the cause. Sometimes we can put a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, but hey, you still been wounded. You need more than that. You need a suture. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I try to make sure that I understand what my guys are going through in the supply chain, what caused the bottleneck, and then try to implement something in place of that bottleneck to smoothen it out. That's what I do. And I think that's the biggest thing, having the foresight to see and understand the bottlenecks before they happen, so do a cause and analysis, SWOT analysis to say, okay, what could happen? Because Murphy's Law, if something can happen, it probably will.
Absolutely. You got to be like Neo in the Matrix when Mr. Anderson starts firing all those bullets. He already knows where they're coming and he's moving away from them.
He's moving. Exactly. I was looking at as a matter of fact, I was looking at some of the what does the Matrix mean this morning on YouTube, early this morning about 4. Couldn't sleep anyway. And I'm like, okay, let me find something on YouTube that I usually get up and study, look at a supply chain video or something that's dealing with my mind to keep me focused. And I was looking at that about Neo. What does it really mean, that whole movie? And it's an awesome movie.
This is fascinating. I bet there are a lot of supply chain parallels in there that you could make.
Exactly.
The world's a supply chain, man. That's for sure. Well, you talk about kind of some of these processes, trying to see proactive bottlenecks or be proactive around bottlenecks. And I think one of the tough things out there as a logistics manager might be just there's a lot going on and it's easy for your brain to kind of shut that out and focus, almost too much in a silo on your day-to-day job. And, there's a lot out there and you have to really kind of push yourself sometimes to not get anxious about everything that's out there. And you got to really hone in on maybe what's a little more critical for you to succeed. Now, in today's environment, there's technology, there's great team members, there's a lot out there. But what do you think is the most critical to succeed today? Is it technology? Is it having good teammates? Is it getting buy-in from your bosses to believe in your vision? Or is it partnerships, like we offer at Ceresys to our shipper customers? And is it all of them? And, with all of that, what does a logistics manager really need to understand, the role of all of those aspects of the job?
Adam, hey man, these are great questions. And I ponder these questions a lot, and almost on a daily or weekly basis. It comes to mind about what can I do better and how can I be better at what I do. And I think all the ones you listed, they're all required because first thing to surely know is your scope of work as a logistic manager. Like ask yourself and your leadership, what is required of me for team success? Because it's not all about me. It's about the whole team success and the success of the organization. That's what they hired me for. And that includes complete top-down buy-in with logistic goals that relate to the organizational goals, great technology and training on it, and to ensure it meets and succeeds the goals of the organization. You can have great technology, but there's nobody trained on it. Hey, that technology is great, but it's not being used to the benefit that it was purchased for. And then if you're a great leader in a position, your team will develop into great team members based on your leadership style. Team members tend to mimic their team leader in many ways. And then real leaders, they create other leaders, not more followers. They want their team members to be their best self in all areas of life and work. And in some cases, partnerships and outsourcing are smart choices to support the overall mission. Sometimes we have to outsource something that we're not great in. If it calls for that, we had to outsource our IT team here at Aurora. We had one IT professional that needed some more help, so we outsourced that particular role to another team because of the fact that with our warehouse facility that we got here in Atlanta, we have a lot of government agencies like VA. We order for VA and other agencies, so we needed to capture all that data correctly in case of inspection, and then to show proof during our compliance. So I think there's a lot of things tie into it all.
Well, and I think one of the things you hit up on there is there's one thing to be a good teammate, to be a good leader, to understand your scope of work. And another thing is about communication, right? And I think people and collaboration can only happen if, one, you understand the mission. That's the scope of work. Two, you understand what resources and tools you have. But then how do you maximize it? You communicate effectively. So, do you think open communication should be on every level of the supply chain? Should the coordinator getting the bill of lading, talk to the director? Is that important in today's supply chain?
I think it is. I think you should get back to the basic core things of supply chain and operations. I think that everybody on every level of supply chain from beginning to end should be able to communicate to each other. That way you know how what you do affects what they do. I've been in warehouses where, the requisitioning or the sourcing supplies is upstairs in a building. The warehouse personnel where we were downstairs. We didn't know when they requisitioned anything unless we looked at the database every morning without them walking downstairs and just saying, "Good morning, talk to Charles. Expect this today. Expect this." Something arrived wrong. We have a problem at the door. The guys, we said this is wrong, but we got to go upstairs and talk to the person that requisitioned it. When that could have been communicating at the weekly meeting, we could be aware of it. We'll be able to look at it. But when you just no communication except via email, that's the breakdown right there. A lot of people choose email over regular communication when you're right there in the office.
Well, I'll tell you what, email is a great way for things to get misunderstood, especially
that's
tone. Right?
It's the tone, yeah.
Tone's important. Oh yeah, it can be a cop out too, and I think as a leader, if you see somebody on your team kind of trying to do something important and brushing it off, or you got to pay attention to those things, and you got to be the one to say, "Hey, let's talk. Let's take this email and take that leadership position." And I've been there. I've had clients in the past where I had a business of my own where maybe something got me frustrated. Based on their email, and I just call them up right away, maybe unannounced instead of just hitting reply. And I got to tell you, it's gotten so many better places. And I think as a human being, things can impact you, and no one's intending to impact you. I think for the most part, I believe people are altruistic and they're good and they want to do good with their fellow human beings. But I think it's also upon us who's receiving the information to reach back out to that person and say, "What did you mean? Let's talk about this. I want to understand your intent so we can get to the larger mission." So yeah, open communication is critical.
I fully agree. And I found that people want to know that they matter and what they do matter to the overall mission of the organization. You don't want to just throw a guy in a cubicle and hope he's doing the right thing, or you never, understand what he's doing. He just don't know where he fits into the organization. You want to go home sometime and say, "Hey, what I do matter on this job. If I do this right, I know that this created this." And people like to feel good about what they do. The humdrum is when you don't know how you fit into the organization or what you're contributing. You're getting paid to do something, but what are you contributing to the overall success of the organization? And I think that when people go to that level of thought, they need to be communicated with. And you can see those leaders, they're right there waiting to be seen. You just got to communicate with them as a leader. You have to communicate.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in it. My wife's taught me a lot about that.
Yeah, my wife too.
And I appreciate her for it. Early on, though, and you're married, and I've been married for a while now as a young person. I've still been married almost 18 years.
Man, that's good. I've been married 31 years, man.
Yeah, and you could probably relate to this early on.
Yeah.
Our wives are honest. And sometimes we aren't willing to, and for good though, I think. Yeah. And I'd rather have someone be direct to me of what they want and what their needs are, what I need to do better, because that pushes me to a better place. And I think you could probably attest to this as we get older and wiser in our marriages, that that direct communication has pushed both of us to a better place. And I think the more we can mimic that in our day-to-day jobs, the better we're going to be.
I fully agree, man. It's like, the whole journey, I look back over my career as a young paratrooper, deployed all the time. My wife raised my daughter, and I was back and forth on deployments all the time, but didn't really understand all she was doing back then because I was just a soldier. I was just 20-something years in the military and airborne. You just going, and that's your world right there. But you come home and try to balance that life with the wife, but the military wife understand the mission. And as you get older, you appreciate them more for hanging in there because really they served with you. Every time we deployed, they had to go. If I had to go to Germany, she had to stop her job and go. So I appreciate those things now as I got older in the relationship. And I tell her all the time, I really appreciate what you've done. As sometimes in life when I was so busy with my own stuff, you still was there. So, and I appreciate it, and I really, really do. And I make sure she knows that every day.
Good deal, man. I try to tell my wife as much as I can, and I think that's important. Now, you have an amazing career, amazing life. You've been working at it. You're still a student every single day, and I think the more that we can be. But if you look back at your 18-year-old self, probably getting ready to enlist in the military and go down that path, in regards to everything you've done, what would you tell that 18-year-old to maybe make it an easier path to achieve and succeed in a career in logistics?
Oh man, that's about the age when I got started too, man. I was, young, just gung ho in the military. You didn't came from airborne school. You got all these patches on. You young, you can run. I would just say to truly listen and learn all you can about the field. When I got the MOS of supply chain, that's what I really wanted to. I wanted to have it in airborne, and I got what I wanted. I would just say truly listen and learn all you can about the field, and then talk to people that have been successful in the field for years. Don't just master part of the supply chain. Like sometimes we get a job, we say, well, that's not my role. That's this. Look, understand every part of it. Understand how your part or what you do every day affects other parts of the supply chain as well. Don't be narrow-minded. Just focus on your little cubicle of the world. Say, how does this affect the whole supply chain? And never pass on a potential problem. Like if you know it's going to be a potential problem, don't pass it to the next stage of supply chain. I'll give you an example of in my last warehouse job. We had some guys that we was dealing with the F-15 program, and we had to ship some parts and equipment to Saudi Arabia. One of the guys said, hey, Mr. Walker, I'm going to build this crate whereby the long forks on the forklift can go up under this crate. And he built a beautiful crate. I'm talking about, it was awesome. We put it on an 18-wheeler. And I said, Kevin, how will the 3PL company get this off of this truck? You see, we got it on there, but you built a special crate with long forks. How do we know they have long forks at the port to get this off? He's like, whoa. I said, think about it. You did a great job here, but nobody will ever know that when they get to the port and they can't get it off. So I try to tell people to look at the big picture, what you do and how it affects what's on the other end. And then you'll be able to see the bigger picture, and then you'll be able to do your job better by ensuring that you pass on the minimal amount of problems to the next person that's picking it up on the supply chain.
Well, how about that? Not just a lesson for supply chain, but probably a good lesson for life and all you do.
Yes, sir.
Because,
Yes, sir.
we're not alone, and our decisions do impact others. And the
Yes,
more
sir.
we understand that, and the more we own the truths of ourselves and aren't afraid to tell those we love and work with the truth, the all better for it we are. And sometimes maybe that truth won't be received
That's right.
by that other person in a way that you expected, but you got to
Right.
be patient enough to understand the mission, the scope of work, and
Yes, sir.
reiterate the vision and show that leadership to your team. And that's what will bring the team along to higher places and create, as you said, future other leaders who can take up the mantle. So me and Charles can one day retire and chill with our wives.
That's right. And chill out.
But be confident that the future is bright.
That's right. Be confident the future's bright. And most time when people feel that what you are saying to them comes from a good place, they usually be receptive. They might reject it in the beginning, but they'll sit back and they'll come back and say, hey, I understand what you were saying yesterday or whatever. I see it all the time. They might not accept it at the time because based on what's going on, the environment at the time. But usually when it comes from a good place, it's usually received good. I found that with my guys. So I ensure that I try to be consistent on my leadership style and listen to them. Just don't jump around, but be consistent and genuinely be concerned about creating other leaders. And that's the foundation I go from.
That's what it's about. Well, Charles,
Yes,
I
sir.
can't thank you enough for coming on to the Freight Project podcast. I really enjoyed talking to you today, and I think there's a lot of great lessons that supply chain and logistics professionals and just people in general can take away from our conversation. So I'm excited
sir.
for everyone who listens to this and for all of our great listeners who tune in each week to the Freight Project podcast. Can't thank you enough for your loyalty and supporting what we have to do out here. So if you're around in the logistics space, look up Charles Walker on LinkedIn. Definitely connect with him. It's worth it. Check out Aurora and what they do as well. And thanks again, everybody,
Yes, sir.
for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you, brother. God bless, man.